Were there certain outbreaks that you had to deal with, certain typhoid or cholera outbreaks that you remember?
Cholera seems to stick in my head because there was only one. And it's interesting because when I went to Middleton 65, 66, I asked the staff who've been there about outbreaks. And they said, what do you want to know? So I said, what about cholera, for instance? And then it came tumbling out how bad it was in the 60s. When I asked Dr. Leong, I said, there's some new work, isn't there, about cholera? This was now already early 70s. Because the improvement in the management of cholera resolved on one fact, that the stools that the patients with cholera pass not only dehydrate them, they cause them shock, and that's how they die. So he says, so far we have been spared. I said, yes, Dr. Leong, because of the public measures. But do we know how to manage? I'm going to a conference on cholera, I think somewhere in Dhaka, where they give me a chance to manage cholera. When I come back, I'll tell you about it. And maybe we should try it out on ourselves. The main thing that he brought back was you must use a solution that contains all the basic elements. So I said, what? Don't use glucose, don't use normal saline. You must use a solution that contains sodium, potassium, chloride, bicarbonate. I said, oh, that means you are talking about a solution which is familiar to us, but we have never used it. He said, yeah, Ringer's lactate. I said, wow. He says, that's the thing. You know about it. I know about it. I went to Dhaka for this conference, and they allowed me to manage a patient with cholera, as though I was the physician. But of course, there were consultants around, because they said, you have never managed a case. Now, here is the thing. You try and manage. So he managed that one case. And, still no cases. 65, 66, 67. So I said, we've done such a good job. He said, you can never be sure. And then he and his wife decided to have a long delayed holiday. He says, you've seen most of the diseases. I said, except cholera. And he said, yes. But I think you can manage. I've never managed a case before, Dr. Young. No, you can manage it. I think it's simple in the sense that you only use one solution. But I said that's different from knowing and from doing. I've never done it. You have done it. He says, yes, that's true. You have to have a nerve. I said, huh. And you won't believe what happened. He had arranged everything to go off. And 2 days before he went out, we had a case, very bad diarrhea. So they called me. I said, my goodness, how can this person be cholera in Singapore? Where did they get it? Public health fellows will do it. I said, okay, let's rehydrate this patient. So I said, patients will come to Middleton Hospital. Meanwhile, you see that you run in fluids. You run in by the liters, And this fellow was in shock. So we got him around. So Dr. Young was going off in a couple of days, and I said, I've got my first case, so I'm equal to you. How many after this, I don't know. But you please go on holiday, not to worry. I think I can manage. I think I can manage. I remember telling him this. But the staff had all been used to managing cholera in the 60s. They didn't have this information about ringers like that. And so I went up to the matron. I said, "You're the only one now. He's going on leave. Let him go. You and I are going to manage. I've never managed a case. You manage." But she said, "Differently." I said, "Yeah, differently. So we better change everything." So we changed everything around. I said, "You can't stop doctors from using what they've been trained to use." I asked the pharmacist, "What can I do other than changing it straight away?" So he said, "Why don't you use your ambulance services when they call you for a case of diarrhea? Just run in this solution and tell them, we brought you the solution." And we solved that problem by managing diarrhea. Any case of diarrhea you send to Middleton, we'll manage. We'll separate the sheep from the goats. So this means that if it's cholera, we keep. If it's not cholera, we put separately, but we manage as well. And that's how we manage to have almost zero mortality. But before that, I used to have to notify each case of cholera. It's a notifiable disease. So
Yes.
I notify to the chief epidemiologist, who's a interesting character because he was an epidemiologist, means that he takes care of not only cholera, typhoid, diphtheria, malaria, AIDS. When he came along, all the figures have got to go to them. So 2 days after the first case, he phoned me up. He says, "Hey, what is this notification here? You put severe cholera." I said, "Kitai, I think you better come and see the cases in the morning. I do around, then you'll understand what I mean by severe." He says, "You mean they're in shock?" See? So he gradually got the notion that we could get on top of the situation, which we did by using Hartmann solution and just running it in as fast as you can. So our thoughts behind all this was, what happens if that fellow's got heart attack? What happens if you've got heart disease? I told the matron, I said, "Look, we got no choice. Let's rehydrate them as though they don't have any handicaps." And as luck would have it, none of them had heart problems. We managed to save almost every one of them by just running in the right solution. And of course, we had to do the public health work later on, keep them at home, and people that at home need to have screening and the various public health measures. In that case, in that way, I think we have done a fairly good job taking care of this disease. But the others still remain with us. And now we've got new characters around
That's
who,
right.
decide to change their character just slightly. Upset us.
That's right. That's very apt
So
way of
this
putting it.
battle goes on.
Dr. Monteiro, I want to ask you about a couple of doctors who were the superintendents of Middleton after your father. I've read about them in the documents, but I don't know much about them. One of them is, of course, Dr. Loh KS, and I managed to track down his daughter, Linda. So Linda didn't know much about Middleton Hospital, although they stayed in the bungalow as well. Any memories of Dr. Loh KS?
Dr. Loh KS. He's a very interesting chap, in the sense that I got to know him when I was posted there. Before that, I never heard of him. But he was already medical superintendent of Middleton. He's that sort of chap, He keeps very quiet, but he taught me so many things. For instance, he taught me how to do a tracheostomy, which is to open the windpipe to give people a chance to breathe, the diphtheria patients. So far, diphtheria was on the decline by the time I went there. I only did one tracheostomy. Poliomyelitis was also on the decline. The exception was this little boy, Wing Wing. I mean, he became world famous in the sense that, he was totally paralyzed and he needed the iron lung. Dr. Leong Kok Hwa's wife was a general practitioner and more to help the husband than anything else. I think that's the correct thing to do. She took a posting in Middleton and she ran a practice from about 11 o'clock to the rest of the day, but she did the morning round in Middleton. I learned so much from her, Mrs. Leong Kok Hwa. Her maiden name is Dorothy Leong. Who's the other doctor you were mentioning?
So before Dr. Leong was another doctor called Dr. Ng Si Yuk.
Oh, now Dr. Ng Si Yuk, I have no experience of his activities in Middleton, except that when I was a medical student, I realized he was actually in the administrative section of the ministry. I can't quite remember when Middleton Hospital was incorporated into the Ministry of Health. Before that, it was run by the municipality of Singapore. And they, Leong Kok Hwa, Ng Si Yuk, were Ng Si Yuk and Leong Kok Hwa were the last two, I think, almost. Ng Si Yuk's son is a physician. I see him in church regularly. Suddenly, I can't remember his name. He was a contemporary of my brother. Whenever he sees me, he asks me, "How's your brother Jerry?" I said, you better write to him and all that. They used to play badminton together and all that. This is Dr. Ng Si Yuk's son. Oh boy. I hope I can get his name before the end of this. But he's still around. He's in his 60s. Yes, my brother's age, 70s now. He's retired. His wife is also a doctor. Cannot remember the names. That's all you can remember for the two doctors?
These two doctors.
And Ng Si Yuk.
Before Dr. Ng was British, I think. 46 to 48 was H.R. Morrison. Do you remember any of the Western doctors?
No.
No.
H.R. Morrison. As I told you, they were recruited by the municipality of Singapore. And we had not yet actually had a real Ministry of Health. Now, of course, it's all under one. So that's why you really don't know them at all.
No problem. Dr. Monteiro, can I ask you about what you mentioned a little bit earlier, the HIV-AIDS pandemic? That came on around your time when you were superintendent. Did that cause you a lot of headaches?
This is the part of the story that I feared, and I knew we were going to come up. Feared meaning that I can't remember so many things, and this part of the story is worse off. AIDS hit us in the world around 1980. And at that time, it was mostly a sexually transmitted disease, which is now as well. So the persons who actually got to see the cases were the colleagues who were working in Middle Road Hospital. And we were involved in the sense that they didn't have an inpatient service. So the minister did touch on this to me. What are you going to do? I said, it's not what am I going to do, it's what Singapore can do. See, the people in Middleton Hospital, they deal mostly with outpatient of a nature because they don't need to be hospitalized. Most of them are not sick. I'm talking about sexually transmitted disease, gonorrhea, syphilis, and you name it. So I told the director, I said, when it comes to people with AIDS, and let's say with tuberculosis causing trouble, they're coughing out blood, they've got acid fast bacilli in the sputum. I know Tan Tock Seng Hospital, the TB wards, won't like to have them because of that stigma about AIDS. We have to realize that the stigma is there, whatever you do. Okay. So you are going to ask me to take the cases over. I will not refuse. I will accept the fact that Middleton may have to take over these patients, you know, with AIDS. And but the patients themselves were reluctant to submit themselves because the scrutiny and the ridicule and the condemnation to get this disease straight away linked you with this, that, and the other thing. I tell you the story. This was early in the outbreak, and the ministry says this case of AIDS must go to Middleton Hospital. I said, yes, we agreed to this. When is the patient coming? Tomorrow? Yes. So I said, can I find out what's his underlying problem? Oh, he's got pulmonary tuberculosis. I said, oh, thank you for telling me. So I told the staff, and I told my deputy, I won't tell you who he is. I didn't tell him that the patient had TB. And then I said, coming, in a couple of hours. She said, let's get ready. So I said, what are you going to get ready for? She looked at me and looked at me. He knew I was pulling his legs. I said, he's got pulmonary tuberculosis. Oh, threw away all these things and said, okay, he's just got pulmonary tuberculosis. So now, why are we panicking? We'll manage the pulmonary tuberculosis. He had something else, which the people who sent him over says, there's something about this patient. We can't get through to him. He's very secretive about one aspect of his life. I said, okay, we got good medical social workers here. Let's see whether they can do it. So in the end, I told myself, I'll talk to him through a translator. I said, you're causing people some problems. And to cut a long story short, he was hiding some things because he's trying to protect a sister of his who's mentally subnormal and lived in the house but locked the doors and never let anyone in. Now that he was going to come into hospital, I said, look, not to worry. We'll get to the bottom of this and sort it out. In the end, we sorted it out. I mean, it's a simple thing like that. But if you let prejudice come in, then you are causing sometimes more trouble than it should be. As it is, the burden that these people have of getting a sexually transmitted disease and people knowing about it is horrendous, frightening. The shame and all that kind of thing. So the other thing was a group of people, nothing to do with AIDS, but drug addicts. Now, this is telling you a story, nothing to do with Middleton, nothing to do with it. It was when I was working in the outpatients and I saw this man skin and bones. And I looked at him. I couldn't see any veins. I said, your records say that you're using drugs. I can't see any veins. And he smiled at me. He says, you really don't know how? I said, please tell me. He shoots it through the femoral vessel. I said, that's fantastic. You don't miss. I can't afford to miss. Otherwise, no fun. I get the pleasure from the drugs. I said, oh my goodness gracious.
God.
No, because I kept it in my head. And this is telling stories. I don't think I'm harming her. When I was working in SGH, I used to park my car outside where no one used it. It's among the trees, not a legalized car park, but I used to do a shortcut through Unit 2 and go to, I was working then in surgery. And then one morning, sisters stopped me and said, you're not supposed to park the car there, but that's not the issue. I said, sister, then what have I done wrong? You've not done anything wrong. I want you to help me. I said, what? I've got a patient who's plump and pretty, but she's got no veins anywhere. And she needs at least about 15 cc's of blood. The staff to deal with so that her problems can be sorted out. I said, sister, I don't work here. Never mind, you're a doctor. You can get the blood. I said, how do you know I can get the blood if no one else can get the blood? I heard. So I used the femoral, I got the blood. She grumbled, the girl, I'm not letting any houseman take the blood. You see, I was a houseman. So that's where I used the alternative word. Thank you, doctor. Thank you, doctor. I said, yes, thank you, miss, but the blood was taken by an intern, okay? Thank goodness we don't have that kind of problem that often. But actually taking blood is such a difficult job, Sometimes you just cannot get it from all these people. That's the only way. I used to take blood from there when I was working in surgery, and the surgeon was doing an operation so he could connect the mouth to the stomach. These were girls who took caustic out of sheer desperation and panic. So the surgeon decided to do 5 operations, not 5, 4, 3, I think. And the staff knew my reputation. No veins. I said, okay, I take one femorals. So it does help to learn all these things and talk to patients sometimes.
Back to AIDS, right? Did you have some of the staff who were very worried about working with AIDS patients? Because at the time, AIDS was like a death sentence in the first 10 years or so, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think even the union got involved, right? Because the union was afraid for its members, the nurses who were having to work with the patients.
It didn't come to us directly in CDC. I think they sorted it out somewhere else. Like Professor Roy Chan, I think he did a lot to try and calm fears and restore confidence and balance. Because the problem with patients with AIDS, as you know, is the immune system is destroyed by the AIDS virus. And because of that, they are so prone to infections and infections and infections. So I don't know whether you can actually sort this out so easily. This is where, and I'm in a minority here, because in people whose cultures go back thousands of years, they've developed an idea about what is healthy, what is not healthy, what is simple, what is dangerous, what can be done, what can't be done. And until you can get them to understand the workings of the immune system and how the immune system protects all of us and what HIV does to damage that immune system. I left the scene with AIDS at a time when there was on the threshold of getting drugs that can effectively help the immune system. I never gone back to find out where we are in this field, but it was definitely a problem at the time when it first appeared. People could panic, and the panic was due to the fact that the disease was not explained to them in simple terms that they could take precautions and realize that, hey, look, I'm not in danger. If I don't do this, this. If I do this, well, I'm asking for trouble. If I'm shooting, drugs, I'm using needles. So that is a continuing battle. I don't know what the situation on the ground. I think it must be better now.
Dr. Monteiro, can I ask you? I mean, you mentioned about the stigma, right? And a lot of people in Singapore have a great fear of infection, right? Of the danger of infection. When you were at Middleton, did you encounter this stigma? This fear of infectious diseases and coming to the hospital?
That's a very, very good question. And I have great difficulty trying to answer honestly how I responded to it.
Remember,
As
you
I
told me
said,
you told me the story, right? When the name changed to CDC. That was
yes,
a
I'm
problem.
coming to that. I'm coming to that. That is typical of what we face. That for years and years, Middleton Hospital, they stay in this high rise just opposite the hospital. And for years, they never raised an issue. And the moment they had to accommodate the fact that we are going to be part of Tan Tock Seng Hospital, now we are called Communicable Disease Center. This is where they panic. So it was quite simple when you explain to them and you get them to not lose their nerve and please try and spread the news to other people that they can also hold on to the situation without losing sleep over it. But it was a real problem when they first changed the name. In fact, we were the last to know about it until they said it's on your front gate, they've taken it out. I said, oh my goodness, how come we didn't take? So you need a public relations effort on this part. It is no longer a joke because people are concerned and you cannot just shake them and say, don't be silly and all that. You have to explain to them. So this comes down to the fact that you have to tell them basic facts. Okay, you can get ill by eating something, breathing something, doing something with one another or yourself, and animals can get at you, birds can get at you, mosquitoes can get at you. So these are the ways in which disease spread. But we're talking about people come from civilization that lasts for thousands of years, and they have taken some of those things to be the truth. So how do you tell them that things have changed? It'll take time. It'll take time, and it's a constant effort. And maybe you should start very young before they can get all the wrong notions in. I don't know. maybe you can start in kindergarten in some very disguised way to tell them, hey, look, you've got a system that is meant to protect you. And so this is the things you do, this you don't do at all, and some of the things you never do, like using drugs. I mean, what else can you do except, to spend time with them and admit to them? And some of the patients themselves are very good ambassadors for these things. But it takes time. It takes time. It's not going to be overnight that you can
That's right.
change.
Yeah.
I think the situation has improved.
Dr. Monteiro, can I show you some old photos? I hope you can see them. So this is the iron lung boy, right?
Yes.
Can you see? Yeah. With your staff, with your nurses.
Okay, I can recognize them, but not the names. The three ladies, 1, 2, 3, are all nursing sisters.
Mm.
I can't remember her name. Sister Ratnam here. This one is Sister Chin. And the three here are staff nurses. Blue, and then this red. I can't remember why. And so some of them would be staff sent to Middleton on rotation. So that's why you see that if you got a dark blue, you mean you're a staff nurse. If you're dark red, second year, light blue is first year nurse.
I
So
see.
that's a ranking. This is June Ling. Can't remember this one. Sister Chin, Sister Ratnam. What's her name, sister? Cannot remember. And this is Wing.
We don't have the iron lung anymore, right? It's gone.
My goodness. That's a good question. I honestly don't know how many iron lungs we had at the time when Matthew was admitted, but they were the life-saving equipment that we had if any child was paralyzed like he was, no movement at all of the chest cage, that you need artificial means to push air into the lungs.
Right.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
When I was there, I remember there were at least about 5 or 6 of them. You must ask the sisters, they keep track about the number of these iron lungs.
I have a photo of you.
Yes.
Later on, he passed away, right? Without recovering.
That's the part of the story I never clarified enough. But there was, he didn't die in Singapore. He died in Melbourne because the parents were, I don't know what the word is, were quite convinced that in Australia they might have a better chance for him to have a better life than in Singapore, where he remained like this in the iron lung.
Some of the old photos. This is the old gate.
Yeah, that's the old Middleton Hospital.
That's when you met the Indian boy, right?
Yes. My dad drove us in. Right at the end there, you can see the office. We stopped just at the gate here, and then he opened the car door and says, you can come upstairs and wait for the rest of your family to come, Nara Raja. Oh boy. Those people with umbrellas were waiting to go in for examination. Some of them were applying for a license to start some food business.
I see.
And so they had to pass the
Hawkers.
test.
I see.
So they had to come here and provide specimens, stool and urine sometimes, mostly that. And they would come certain mornings of the day.
So this is when it became CDC. This is photo is from your successor, Dr. Chu.
Yes,
This is some of your staff.
there's George.
George Yeo, yeah, the telephone operator.
Yes, he was more than telephone operator. He was jack of all trades, and he did so much for us. You know.
What else did he do?
I'm sorry.
What else did George do?
He was generally in charge, as you said, of the telephone operator job. But in addition to that, he was a great all-rounder who helped here, helped there, and made things hum. Yeah.
That's George, and you here seated.
Yeah.
So young at the time.
Yes.
This is the admin office.
That's the office. On the left side is the office of the medical director. On this side is the pharmacy. And this was built way back in the 20s or even earlier when they built the hospital.
Now the names have all changed, right? They all start with 800s. So this is
now this is the matron's quarters where we stayed, and this is the outhouse. These are buildings that came up in the 60s. Housing board.
I forgot to ask you about the morgue. Any stories about the morgue?
The
mortuary.
Oh, the mortuary. Nataraja was the one who asked me, because I had one of the rooms facing the mortuary. So he asked me this question. He says, the building that you can see, is the light on at night or not? Let me know. And then, of course, I found out when the mortuary is not occupied, because the deceased who were in the mortuary were removed for burial and services, religious services elsewhere every morning. But when there was someone in the mortuary, the light was on at night. If there was no light, that means there's no one in the mortuary. Yeah. So you can imagine what it did to a 10-year-old boy.
Yeah. Did you retire from Middleton, from CDC? Was that your
yes,
last
when the
job?
time came, I left there.
You came back to CDC in 2019, because the SLA organized a tour. Is this photo here?
You know what I was talking about.
You're talking about your memories.
No, at that time, I don't know what we were talking about.
Okay.
These were visitors, and the reason they were there was professional in the sense that
they were just visiting the hospital.
Visiting, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because at the time, it had closed down already. Dr. Monteiro, how do you look back at your time at Middleton Hospital? How do you look back upon those years?
Things change. Disease patterns alter. Some disease disappear. Others come back. And of course, the other things are the new diseases that we never handled before, and now they become a problem. Not only just for a small number of people, but involve populations and whole populations. In other words, pandemics involving large numbers of people. So all this means that we cannot afford to take things for granted. Will cholera come back to Singapore? I hope never. But that just tells you what we need to do and how we can be prepared. I don't know. I leave it to the experts and the current young people to deal with this problem, because they have to be on top of the ball to know what to do, and the time sometimes is very short for them to act. We can only tell them what we saw in the past. Whether it'll come back again, I doubt very much.
What would you say about your role and your contribution to CDC? Have you thought about that?
Yes and no.
Mm,
The part that we must always never forget, thinking that one person can make a difference. Up to a point, yes, but we need, from the caring point of view, people with a heart, people with a mind and decision to help one another. I think that one you cannot run away with.
mm,
Can't run away from either. You know, we'll always need that. What else can I say? To
mm,
be prepared. Yes, to be prepared. There are people, fortunately, who are on the job, watching and giving us uh, advance information if possible
mm.
to minimize the damage. But is that enough? I don't know. I can't answer that question. Um, we have been blessed, I think, by the fact that people are working on these problems, and so they come up with solutions. That's all I can say. You know,
Right.
we need help from one another to take care of the people who need our help.
Mm,
Always, it's never changed all these years and years. You know, in
mm,
some way or another, uh, we need to be there to render them sometimes very basic help, sometimes a bit more sophisticated, but the caring part of it, that one is paramount and most important.
yeah. Final question. What do you think we should do with the CDC? There's a real risk that it might be demolished. Do you think that some part of it or the whole of it can be conserved?
Wow. I think there is now a department that's taking care of infectious diseases as it should be
Mm,
now. Now, what was built as Middleton Hospital goes back to the beginning of the 20th century, when the thinking was different from now. I think, uh, having said that, you ask the question, what should we do
mm,
with the grounds
that's
of
right.
Middleton
Mm,
Hospital? Now, this is in a part of Singapore. Next to it is a multi story building, I don't know how tall, which houses the new university.
yes, that's right.
And I thought that there is, I think, an authority that takes care of these matters. What should we do with that building? I mean, land is scarce in Singapore,
Mm,
can be very expensive. Without thinking, I thought maybe that the grounds of Middleton Hospital, take out all the buildings and return it to the people around it.
mm,
I think that part of Singapore, if you look at where the Indian Association is, the Ceylonese Association is, that was a recreational area which now has been constricted right down to the basics. So, will that help all of the people to put their heads together and see how we can use this area as recreation.
That's a very interesting idea. I have not thought about that possibility, yeah?
Because what's left on that segment of from Tessenson Road almost to is it Balestier Road?
Mm.
It's a very narrow piece of land now. It looks more and more narrow as time goes on with all the tall buildings.
Mm.
So maybe you should relocate these recreation clubs to somewhere else. I don't know.
Mm.
Interestingly enough, when they wanted to build, they wanted to, what's the word for it? I think relocate grounds for cricket.
Mm.
They went into some far off area in the west coast of Singapore, where there is still, fortunately, land for these things, but that's a long distance to travel for recreation. So this one might serve the people of that area. I don't know,
Mm.
but this needs a bit of decision and pulling and tugging here and there so that you can get the best out of it. Maybe give up those old areas there and use this area. I don't know, but logistics and various other aspects need to be sort of put in so that we
Yeah.
can make the best use of it.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, the agencies will have to think about that with the
Right.
architects and planners, but I like the idea. I like the idea very much.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed this podcast. Really love listening to your memories. Your memory is still fantastic, regardless of what you say. See you soon again. Take care.
Thank you.